Hey friends, this is Michael Bohm with Youth Apologetics Training. Today is my 250th episode, which is kind of exciting. But anyway, we're going to keep going on this series about the ancient astronauts as we are rapidly approaching the end of the world. On December 21st, the aliens are coming. They're going to show up. They're going to say, we created you, and then they're going to blow up the planet. And I know all of you guys are concerned, so let's go ahead. Sorry about that, friends. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to keep going. We're going to talk about some different people like Eric von Daniken. We're going to continue talking about him. Also, Zecharia Sitchin and some of the theories and different things that they use as evidence for what they believe is our creators, the aliens. So let's jump right in. Going back to von Daniken here. Von Daniken goes on about artifacts like some strange jar-type things that were found in Baghdad that resemble... There's so much conjecture involved here, but it's just enough that, you know, if you want to use your sci-fi imagination, it can be fun. But these jar-type things really could have been used as a crude battery, and you could have got some voltage out of them. Not very much, but if you string them together in series, like all batteries, I mean, you can take a really small battery, and if you get enough of them strung together in a series, you can create a lot of voltage, or you can create a lot of amps if you put them in parallel. So anyway, he thinks that these electric batteries found in Baghdad are in fact batteries and not some kind of odd jar for storing who knows what. So anyway, there's things like that. There's the anti-Cytherea mechanism. I mean, he points to all kinds of different odd things that are found around the world that you look at them, you raise an eyebrow, and you go, well, gosh, what is that? He likes to argue, and this is interesting, geographically separated historical cultures will have themes in their artwork that a lot of times somewhat imply a common origin. Now, again, all right, let's be realistic here. A lot of that, when you sit down and you look at these quote-unquote common themes, you're like, what? Are you serious? Are you really going to call that a common theme? Very contrived, very forced. Okay, then there are some that you're like, whoa, well, that's interesting. But guys, we all live on the same planet, and even though we might be separated geographically, I mean, there's a lot of things that enter our mind that are very common. And so the idea that somebody having a particular idea about something on one side of the world and somebody else having a very similar story, theme, or idea on the other side of the world and drawing a picture of it, it's very possible. Okay? But, again, is there a chance that there might be a common theme? Again, we'll get to the other side of this, the Christian side of the arguments, who, you know, these different Christian organizations and groups who believe, well, they have some alternative theories on what this phenomenon actually represents, what it is. Again, there might be something to that. I don't know about preaching that from the pulpit. We have von Daniken always talks about this tomb of the classic era Maya ruler of Palenque, Pakal. All right, and I don't know, pretty sure I'm pronouncing Palenque right, but I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Pakal right. It's this lid from this sarcophagus, and I'll post a picture on the website for today's podcast of this lid. He thinks that the lid is portraying an ancient astronaut seated inside of a spaceship. And guys, according to Maya mythology that's actually depicting the tree of life, and he is seated at the base of the tree. But when you look at it, if you stare long enough and you kind of look it around, you really can use your imagination and make it almost look like he is seated inside of a rocket. He's on his back. You can see the flames coming out of the base of the rocket. You can see smoke curling up around the sides of it like it's taken off. It's pretty funny. Whatever the case, it's interesting to look at. I'll give you a picture of that. But as far as what do the Mayans say about it, they're like, no, that's the world tree. Okay. But anyway, that's what Von Daniken says. And I guess on that theme, I mentioned just a minute ago, they like this ancient astronaut group oftentimes will take ancient writings of different various events, whether they are descriptions of a supernatural event or whatever, a miracle, something like that. And then they will say, well, that was a primitive people with a primitive dialect trying to describe an event that happened from their perspective. And when they see this high-tech stuff and these people coming from the stars, they don't have any way to describe it other than it's magic, it's supernatural, it's godly, whatever, and their technology has to be supernatural of some kind. And because they come from the stars, they must be gods. And Von Daniken and many others, and even some Christians, look at Ezekiel. Have you guys heard this one? Ezekiel chapter 1. I'm going to read this. I want to read this account to you really quick, because they'll look at this passage of Scripture in the book of Ezekiel, and it picks up in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4. It's an account of Ezekiel being visited by, well, it's a theophany, and so most likely this is Jesus. But Ezekiel sees God on a throne. The throne is being held up by 4 living creatures, and what's interesting, this throne comes down, and it is clearly a throne. And I hate to say it, but all these ancient astronaut guys, they disregard that completely. It is the most bizarre thing. But they will point at the 4 living creatures and say that it's actually not living creatures, but propellers. That's right, propellers. So Ezekiel was such a primitive man, okay, and he's of such low intellectual stature that he was unable to describe propellers in anything other than 4 men. These creatures, these cherubim, holding up this throne. All right, and they key in on these wheels, the wheel within a wheel, with the eyes like fire around the wheel. All right, if you use your imagination and you just key into this whole wheel idea, you can imagine this spaceship, this flying saucer with a bunch of windows and, lights inside and, little gray aliens looking out the windows, take me to your leader kind of stuff. But just listen to the Scripture. Just listen to it. And you will realize it has nothing to do with flying saucers. This is a theophany event. This is the throne of God coming down, being held up by 4 cherubim, not propellers. And listen to this whole wheel thing, okay? And so, verse 4, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire unfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. By the way, they're talking about combustion. They're talking about fire coming out of the engine, if this was a flying spaceship. Using some kind of combustion, some flames to fly around in space. All right, so verse 5, also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They looked just like propellers. No, oh, I'm sorry, that's not what it says. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet. Okay, again, does this sound like propellers? And the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. And they 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. Wait, what? I thought they were propellers. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. All right, and as an aside, this is such a bizarre account. I mean, come on, you got to admit, these cherubim that I'm about to describe, that Ezekiel describes here, unbelievable. So these beings, listen to this, verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Okay, these beings had 4 faces. They had the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. And so moving on, verse 11, thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go. They went, and they turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps, and went up and down among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. Interesting. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of beryl. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. And when they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. Okay, and it goes on from there. Whoa, what in the world is being talked about there? That's interesting stuff, is it not? Is that alien spaceships? No, that right there. And there's a very similar description in Revelation chapter 1 of the same throne with the 4 creatures. In fact, the book of Daniel talks about wheels as well. So anyway, that's Eric von Daniken. Now let's look at Zecharia Sitchin. And I listened to a lot of his material back when I was younger, before I got saved, kind of like Richard Hoagland. He runs in the same crowd, and so he believes in similar things. He's got a series that he calls the Earth Chronicles, and in this series he talks about the Sumerians and how they believed in a 12th planet. Now that's counting the sun, moon, and Pluto as planets, by the way. Anyway, and this 12th planet was supposed to be called Nibiru. And Nibiru, apparently it's on a 3,600-year orbit around the solar system. And there is apparently a race of astronauts that lived on Nibiru at one time. And they sent a group of 50 of these people or beings that lived on Nibiru. They were referred to as the Anunnaki, which the Anunnaki are mentioned in the Bible as a group of people. And in fact, in the Old Testament, they are one of the groups of people that are called giants. What's up with that? What's up with that? There's giants mentioned in the Bible many different times. Goliath was a giant. King Og was a giant. You have the Rephaim, the Anunnaki, and there's a bunch of different groups, different family names, it almost sounds like, different tribes. Anyway, the Anunnaki of Zecharia Sitchin, mind you, they're from Nibiru. They come to Earth around 400,000 years ago. Their whole purpose, their mission, was to mine raw materials and transport them back to Nibiru. Okay, but after they quickly realized that there's only 50 of them and they're not very effective, 50 people can't get too much done as far as supplying raw materials for another planet, and so they set about to genetically engineer a group of manual laborers, basically a slave force. And they create us. So there you have a creation story all wrapped into this science fiction story here. And Zechariah's beliefs go on. These Anunnaki apparently were pretty active in our human affairs until their culture was destroyed by a global catastrophe. So apparently something happened on Nibiru, and when this went down, the Anunnaki that were here left the humanity that they had created here. And so that's Zecharia Sitchin's model. Again, he's an interesting guy because he does go around and he does a lot of speaking and, makes waves in this community of ancient astronaut theorists. Okay, let's stop right there. Tomorrow we'll talk about a couple other big names in the movement, and then we'll just keep going, looking at various bits of pieces of evidence that the proponents of the ancient astronaut theory use to support their theory. So anyway, come out to the website, youthapologeticstraining.com, and there you can leave comments and questions. I really do want to talk to you guys. You can also catch me on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. And with that, I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.